Well, the Season 2 finale of Monarch Legacy of Monsters pretty much delivers everything you would expect from a MonsterVerse show. There are big kaiju fights, some slightly uneven visual effects, and the familiar theme that Titans aren't really monsters, but just massive, unpredictable creatures. And of course, it ends with a clear setup for Season 3. But what really works here is the character side of things. Episode 10 was not just about the spectacle, it also had some of the show's most emotionally grounded moments so far. However, I should warn you, there are many big surprises to unravel, as most of the major reveals were already laid out in the previous episode, especially the importance of the Skull Island rift and the outline of Isabel's plan. This finale is more about bringing all those threads together, and for the most part, it does that really well. Even if this season still left us with a few unanswered questions that feels intentional to the plot that Monarch is saving up for in Season 3. Having said that, let's discuss what happens with the Randas and Titan X in the Season 2 finale of Monarch Legacy of Monsters.
So the finale picks up right where the penultimate episode left us, with Isabel getting Titan X agitated enough to kill Kong just so she can freely use the rift in Skull Island for her time travel shenanigans. Even if Kate tried her best to keep Kentaro from falling into Isabel's trap, he too was deluded to accept the truth and would stop at nothing until he could bring Hiroshi back from the dead. While all this was going on and that Monarch outpost, we see Keiko, Lee, Mei, Tim, and a couple of other operatives making their way to the battlefield of Kong and Titan X. As they go through the forest, Lee and Keiko start piecing things together about the rifts and Bill's research. Keiko even admits that when she first came back from Axis Mundi and saw what Hiroshi had become, she assumed Bill had simply abandoned him. But now, after discovering the capsules on the island, she realizes that was never the case because Bill had been trying, in his own way, to bring his family back together. Lee also agrees and points out that Bill was the only one who figured out Skull Island is basically a kind of grand central station for the rifts scattered across the planet. Keiko further builds on that idea, suggesting that Titan X likely uses the Skull Island rift in order to move between their world and Axis Mundi. This pretty much means they would have to lure Titan X back to that rift and hope that opens a passage so she can go through. But the problem is figuring out how to pull that off. Before they can come up with an answer, a herd of massive caterpillar-like creatures come stampeding through the forest, forcing Lee and Keiko to dive for cover inside an old, decaying helicopter. One that looks exactly like what the Monarch crew used during the 1970s mission. Once the creature passes, it becomes clear why they were running, because turns out Kong is nearby. As they regroup, Lee and Keiko spot Isabel's helicopter overhead, blasting the screeches of skull crawlers to draw Kong's attention, who appears to be heading toward the outpost. That gives them a lead, because if they follow the chopper or track down the last known signal from the device attached to Titan X's body, they should be able to find their Titan. That way, Lee and Keiko could easily free Titan X, send it into the rift, and in turn avoid any direct confrontation with Kong. Meanwhile, as Mei, Tim, and the Monarch team make their way toward the outpost, one of the operatives asks why Monarch abandoned it in the first place. Tim casually explains that there was some kind of incident back in the 90s, and apparently the use of sunscreen kept attracting skull crawlers, which led to repeated attacks on the base. He really doesn't go into detail though, and quickly moves on, which felt pretty hilarious to me. Not long after, they run into a few of Isabel's employees and manage to hijack her jeep in order to speed things up. On the other hand, Lee and Keiko continue to catch up on everything they missed. Keiko talks about Kate's strange new abilities, while Lee shares his surreal encounter with his younger self and how he had to stop that version of himself from rescuing Keiko too early. Now, Keiko is visibly upset by that story because, from her perspective, if Lee had made a different choice, she might have had more time with Hiroshi, and just maybe things would have turned out differently for him. She feels like Lee took that chance away from her by deciding how her story should unfold. However, Lee pushes back, asking what she would have done in his place, but Keiko did not have an answer because deep down, she knew the situation wasn't that simple. As no one understood the full consequences of messing with time, changing something that big could have made things worse. As painful as it was, she also realized Lee acted with the best intentions in mind and with very limited knowledge. I think Keiko was always destined to come back, and that is why her return never created any further anomalies. Her frustration is still valid though, and given that she is grieving, that kind of loss doesn't come with easy logic. Anyway, their argument doesn't last long because they soon run into Tim, Mei, and the rest of the Monarch team. While Keiko joins them to head toward the outpost, Lee splits off on his own to hijack a helicopter, use the speakers to play the recording of Kate communicating with Titan X, and use that to guide her back to the rift. Meanwhile, we jump back to Kentaro, who is seen informing Isabel's goons that he has located Kate in a containment cell. He then keeps pushing his idea that time travel could be used to save Hiroshi, but Kate tries to snap him out of it, warning that Isabel is just manipulating him and only cares about using Axis Mundi for her own profit. But Kentaro is too far invested to listen at this point, so he ignores her and lets the operatives take her away to another holding cell. On the other hand, we have Cutler updating Isabel about the implants inside Titan X finally beginning to work. In response, Isabel warns him not to repeat Brenda's mistake by overloading the Titan with too many neural pulses, which could cause the system to fail. Soon after, Cutler reports that Titan X is starting to behave unpredictably by resisting the implant's control. Isabel, however, doesn't seem to be too worried because a reaction of this kind is apparently normal. Kentaro also tries to warn Isabel that Titan X is probably not just fighting to get back the egg they have stolen from her, and it is probably why the Titan refused to stay under control no matter how advanced their tech is. He even starts questioning Isabel's motives and tries to get her to stop pushing the creature into a fight with Kong. But before the conversation can go anywhere, they get an alert about Kong, who is already on his way. At that point, there is no backing out because the clash is inevitable. During this kerfuffle, Kate manages to escape her cell and unexpectedly comes face to face with Titan X. Moments later, we see Kong also arriving, and just like that, the two Titans immediately start fighting. With chaos breaking out around her, Kate has no other option but to run toward the nearest gate at the outpost. Luckily, Tim, Keiko, May, and the Monarch team spot her, allowing Keiko to quickly grab a jeep to go get her. While she manages to reach Kate, the vehicle is crushed in the middle of the Titan fight, forcing them to run to the nearest base. Meanwhile, Isabel doubles down in her plan as she orders Cutler to push the neural implants into overdrive, hoping to enrage Titan X enough to kill Kong for good. We then see Tim, May, and the Monarch team break into the base, which immediately puts Isabel on edge. She now wants to cut her losses and evacuate, hoping to avoid any fallout landing on Apex. But Kentaro refuses to abandon the operation because for him, Skull Island is too valuable as the rifts here are key to their time travel ambitions, and finding another location like this would be nearly impossible. Desperate to make the island safe for them to work, Kentaro pushes Titan X's neural implants past the limits, hoping it will force the Titan to kill Kong once and for all. After that, he and Isabel just go into hiding just as Tim and May take over the control room. After May checks the system, she realizes there is no way to undo what has been done, as Kai Vilu's artificial induced rage cannot be reversed. With that option off the table, they focus on opening the containment doors so Keiko and Kate don't get caught in the middle of the Titan fight. But opening those doors has an unintended consequence as it reveals the location of Titan X's egg, and the moment the Titan senses it, everything changes as she breaks free from the implant's control, pushes past the interference, and rushes to reunite with her baby. Then comes a surprisingly tender moment as Kai Vilu shows her egg to Kong, and just like that, he immediately seems to understand what has been happening to her. Instead of continuing the fight, Kong simply backs off by climbing up a mountain and gives her space to pass, thus ending the conflict in a way that feels unexpectedly emotional and honestly kind of adorable. Given how Kong was orphaned at a very young age, I think he understood how he was being manipulated into harming Titan X, which is why this ended up being such an emotional moment. As we see the main cast observing this beautiful moment, they also realize the Titan X is sort of heading into the wrong direction. Turns out the neural implants have left her brain all scrambled, and now she cannot seem to figure out where the rift is. Luckily, Lee had a chopper with his speakers to guide Titan X, but as they all board it, Kate goes looking for Kentaro, who was running away with Isabel. While she tries to stop him from going on this insane mission, Kentaro was too fixated on traveling back in time to Axis Mundi and bringing Hiroshi back to the surface of the planet from the time he was stuck on the other side. So the siblings part ways on a bitter note. Anyway, after the chopper takes to the air, May starts playing the recording to guide Titan X back to the rift. Unfortunately, the player breaks down, pushing Kate to use her connection with a kaiju to communicate with her and lead her towards the rift. Surprisingly, it works, as Kate really ends up saving this misguided and misunderstood Titan by sending her back to her home. After the rift opens up, everyone leaves the chopper and witnesses Kai Vilu work her magic. As the Titan opens the rift, she gives Kate a little dap of respect before going through. Because the rift stays open for some time, we spot the younger version of Lee notice both Keiko and his older self. After young Lee says goodbye to Keiko, it allows her to process her previous disagreements because now she understands everything. This was such a cool payoff, as young Lee salutes his older self, thus closing his chapter, so old Lee can finally move on. And that, folks, brings us to the ending moments of Monarch Legacy of Monsters Season 2, which of course sets up the next season by shifting the timeline forward by 2 weeks. Firstly, we see director Reddick Barris take Keiko and Kate to a basement in the Monarch HQ, where he reveals that Tim and May were setting up an office that is going to be Monarch 2.0. Apparently, it will be a very small yet clandestine version of the organization that gets back to the intentions of its original founders. He also asks Keiko to keep her return a secret because giant monsters are already too much for the world to deal with. They would lose their minds if they hear about Axis Mundi's resurrection concept. We then see Keiko and Kate talk about how Kentaro aims to bring Hiroshi back, and that is why their first assignment is to track down Kentaro and Isabel before they can cause any further damage. Meanwhile, Lee is also following those two, but separately. We see him meeting up a man named A. Wood, who explains how he thinks he has the key to unlocking Axis Mundi. And that is why Kentaro and Isabel also visited him, but he sent them on their way. However, when Lee insists on seeing this key, he is taken to see what turns out to be Rodan, who is secretly nesting on top of an active volcano. What can we expect from Monarch Legacy of Monsters Season 3? Well, if I have to start wondering about Season 3, my first question would be why on earth were Isabel and Kentaro looking for Rodan, and what does Lee want with Daikaiji? More importantly, if Rodan was last seen in Mexico during the events of Godzilla, King of Monsters, what on earth is he doing in Thailand? Now, of course, we know that Isabel and Kentaro are looking for Rodan as they want the Titan to open up a rift for them, but why Lee? I think he just wants to stop them at any cost and make sure there are no anomalies being formed due to alterations happening during time traveling via Axis Mundi. Given that Rodan is the only Titan we see on the surface, following him would eventually lead them to Axis Mundi, and Lee has to stop anyone trying to tinker with time. However, he has lost his Titan calling phone, so in order to go to Axis Mundi, he would have no other means than tailgating a Titan. From what it seems like so far, Season 3 is about to be a Rodan-focused storyline. While I do not know if this Daikaiju is going to appear in Godzilla x Kong Supernova, I'm sure people will love to see how Rodan reached Mexico in the first place. Moreover, with all the Skull Island callbacks this season, it really feels like the perfect time to bring back characters like James Conrad, Mason Weaver, San Lin, and Houston Brooks, especially because it was already hinted that they were involved in many Titan-related missions, so there's clearly more story to be explored there. If Season 3 sticks with its mix of present-day events and flashbacks, it could introduce older versions of these characters in the current timeline who could be tied to the powers that be as mentioned by Reddick, while using flashbacks to show how they helped shape Monarch into what it is today. Sure, actors like Tom Hiddleston, Brie Larson, Jing Tian, and Corey Hawkins all have packed schedules, but it is easy to imagine them coming back for another round in the MonsterVerse, especially if it means crossing paths with Skullcrawlers, Kong, Godzilla, or even Rodan again. That's just my 2 cents. What are your theories about Monarch Legacy of Monsters Season 3? Let us know your thoughts in the comment box down below.